Welcome to the world of daily life stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy listening. The departure of tensions. The bustling airport terminal was alive with its usual symphony of sounds, announcements echoing through the speakers, the rhythmic clicking of luggage wheels on polished floors, and the chatter of travelers hurrying to their gates. Among the diverse crowd stood Dr. Amanda Williams, a striking figure of grace and poise. Amanda wasn't just another traveler, she was a trailblazing Black entrepreneur, a billionaire who had built her empire from the ground up. Her story was one of resilience, innovation, and relentless hard work. Dressed in an elegant black pantsuit, with her natural curls framing her face like a crown, Amanda commanded attention without seeking it. As Amanda approached the gate for Flight 372, a direct route from New York to Los Angeles, she carried an air of quiet confidence. The trip was a routine business venture, but her presence was anything but ordinary. People often recognized her, not just for her wealth, but for the meaningful impact of her work. Her philanthropic initiatives had provided scholarships to underprivileged communities, funded tech incubators for minority entrepreneurs, and even contributed to sustainable development projects worldwide. The flight seemed to be a typical affair. Amanda had settled into her first-class seat, the subtle hum of the engines providing a comforting background noise. She had greeted the flight attendants politely, exchanged a few words with a couple sitting across from her, and opened her tablet to review notes for an upcoming keynote speech. But then, a subtle shift in the atmosphere caught her attention. The captain, a tall, middle-aged white man named Captain Robert Phillips, entered the cabin. His expression was stern, almost disapproving, as he scanned the rows of passengers. When his eyes landed on Amanda, he seemed to pause for a moment longer than necessary. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice firm but carefully measured. "May I have a word with you outside the cabin?" Amanda blinked, caught off guard. "Is there a problem, Captain?" "I'd prefer to discuss it outside," he replied, his tone leaving little room for negotiation. Confused but composed, Amanda gathered her belongings and followed him back into the terminal. A growing sense of unease settled over her as they moved away from the gate. When they reached a quieter area, Captain Phillips turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Ma'am," he began, "there's been a report of suspicious behavior. For the safety of all passengers, I'm going to have to ask you to deplane." Amanda froze, her mind racing. "Suspicious behavior? I haven't done anything but sit in my seat. Is this some kind of mistake?" The captain crossed his arms, his stance rigid. "I'm afraid we can't take any chances." Her confusion quickly turned to indignation. "What kind of behavior are you accusing me of? I've passed every security check. Are you telling me this is based on someone's unfounded suspicion?" As their voices carried, curious onlookers began to gather. Fellow passengers craned their necks, some stepping closer to catch snippets of the conversation. A middle-aged woman in a floral dress frowned and whispered to her husband, while a young man with headphones around his neck pulled out his phone, discreetly recording. Amanda took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. "Captain, I'm not leaving this flight without a legitimate explanation. This feels personal, and I won't tolerate being targeted." By now, the tension was palpable. A few passengers began to speak up. "She's been sitting there quietly the whole time," said a man in a business suit. "I was right behind her at check-in. She's done nothing wrong." "Yeah, what's going on here?" another passenger chimed in. "This doesn't seem right." Captain Phillips' resolve wavered for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. "This is a matter of protocol. I'm asking for cooperation." Amanda stood her ground, her voice steady but firm. "And I'm asking for transparency. If I'm being removed from this flight, I have a right to know why." As the impasse continued, an airport supervisor arrived, alerted by the growing commotion. The supervisor, a petite woman with a clipboard, assessed the situation and turned to Amanda. "Dr. Williams, could we step aside and discuss this?" Amanda hesitated but nodded. She followed the supervisor to a nearby seating area, aware of the eyes and murmurs following her every move. The captain remained at the gate, his expression unreadable. "I understand this is upsetting," the supervisor began, her tone conciliatory. "The captain has certain discretionary powers, Anne." Amanda cut her off. "This isn't about protocol. This is about bias. I need answers, and I won't accept vague explanations." The supervisor faltered, clearly unprepared for Amanda's composed yet unyielding demeanor. Before she could respond, a voice rang out from the crowd. "This is unacceptable." It was the young man with the headphones, now holding his phone aloft. "I've got this all on video. She's being treated unfairly, and we all see it." His declaration seemed to embolden others. One by one, passengers began to voice their support. "She has every right to be on that plane," shouted an elderly woman with a cane. "Why is she being singled out?" demanded a mother with a toddler on her hip. "We need answers." The momentum shifted, the tide of public opinion turning against the captain. Amanda felt a surge of gratitude but also frustration. She shouldn't need an audience to validate her dignity. As the situation escalated, Amanda knew one thing for certain: she wouldn't back down. If this was a battle she hadn't chosen, she was determined to win it, with grace, integrity, and the undeniable force of truth. The terminal buzzed with tension as Amanda sat across from the airport supervisor. Despite the calm demeanor she tried to project, her heart was racing. Being publicly humiliated like this was an affront not only to her dignity but also to the countless individuals she represented as a symbol of success and resilience. The crowd that had gathered around the gate hadn't dispersed. If anything, the murmurs of discontent among the passengers had grown louder. Amanda didn't need to hear the whispers to know what they were saying. It was a familiar narrative, one she had encountered time and time again, though rarely this blatant. A black woman succeeding against all odds, daring to occupy spaces others thought she didn't belong in. She took a deep breath and adjusted her posture, reminding herself that she had dealt with worse and come out stronger. "Dr. Williams," the supervisor began again, her voice quieter now, as if she, too, was aware of how absurd the situation looked. "This is highly unusual, and I want to assure you that we'll conduct a full investigation." Amanda raised a hand, cutting her off. "You're missing the point. This isn't about unusual. This is about systemic bias dressed up as protocol. If you can't give me a concrete reason for this so-called suspicion, then what you're doing is discriminatory. Plain and simple." The supervisor hesitated, her clipboard clutched tightly. "I understand your frustration, and I'll do everything I can to resolve this." Amanda's tone sharpened. "What you can do is reinstate me on that flight. I've complied with every security check. I've done nothing to warrant this treatment. Meanwhile, your captain is standing there, making a decision that reeks of prejudice." The supervisor looked over her shoulder at Captain Phillips, who was still lingering at the gate, trying to avoid eye contact. His body language was tense, his jaw tight. The young man recording the entire scene stepped closer, his phone pointed at the captain now. "Hey, Captain," he called out. "Care to explain why you're kicking her off the plane? The whole world's going to see this, you know. You're trending already." The captain stiffened, visibly uneasy for the first time since the ordeal began. He glanced at the crowd, which had grown to include not just passengers from Amanda's flight but travelers from neighboring gates as well. Someone was live-streaming, judging by the steady stream of comments flashing on a phone screen. The words racist and profiling appeared frequently, along with calls for justice. Amanda stood up slowly, her stature commanding attention. She turned to the passengers who had rallied around her, their faces a mixture of anger, confusion, and solidarity. "I appreciate your support," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "This isn't just about me. This is about a pattern of behavior that too many people experience every day. And today, I'm saying no more." Her words were met with scattered applause, which grew louder as more people joined in. Amanda turned back to the supervisor, her eyes steady. "Now, either you reinstate my seat, or you explain, on record, why I'm being removed. And make no mistake, I will pursue this legally." The supervisor shifted uncomfortably but didn't respond. Instead, she motioned for the captain to join them. When he approached, Amanda met his gaze head-on. For a moment, he looked as though he might say something conciliatory, but his pride, or perhaps his prejudice, won out. "Dr. Williams," he began, his tone clipped, "this is not a personal attack. My job is to ensure the safety of all passengers, and when concerns are raised, I have to act on them." "What concerns?" Amanda challenged. "Who raised them, and on what basis?" "You're hiding behind vague accusations, because you have nothing substantial to stand on. Do you realize how damaging this is, not just for me, but for you, for this airline, for every passenger watching this unfold?" The captain's jaw tightened further. "I don't have to explain myself to you." Amanda let out a bitter laugh. "Actually, you do. Because whether you like it or not, you're accountable to every person who steps onto your plane. And right now, all they see is a man abusing his authority." The crowd murmured in agreement. A woman holding a baby stepped forward, her voice trembling with emotion. "I've flown with Dr. Williams before. She's one of the kindest, most respectful people you'll ever meet. This isn't right, and you know it." A middle-aged man in a suit added, "I'm not getting back on that plane until this is resolved. If this is how you treat someone like her, what's to stop you from doing it to the rest of us?" The captain glanced at the growing number of passengers voicing their disapproval. His resolve seemed to waver, but he remained silent. Amanda saw her opening and pressed on. "This could have been a quiet flight," she said, her tone measured but pointed. "Instead, it's becoming a case study in discrimination. Do you want your name attached to this when it makes headlines? Because believe me, it will." The young man with the phone nodded. "Oh, it's already trending. #racist pilot is blowing up. You're famous, Captain." The captain's face flushed. He turned to the supervisor, his voice low but urgent. "This is getting out of hand. Do something." The supervisor, clearly caught between loyalty to her colleague and the overwhelming pressure from the crowd, took a deep breath. "Dr. Williams," she said cautiously, "we're prepared to reinstate your seat and offer our sincerest apologies for the inconvenience." The captain's head snapped toward her. "What? You can't just—" "I can," the supervisor said firmly, surprising both him and the crowd. "And I will. This has gone far enough." The crowd erupted into cheers and applause. Amanda, though relieved, didn't let her guard down. She looked directly at the captain, her voice steady but laced with steel. "I hope this is a lesson for you. Power doesn't excuse prejudice. Next time, think twice before you act on baseless assumptions." She turned to the passengers, her expression softening. "Thank you all for standing up today. This isn't just about me, it's about all of us refusing to accept injustice." As Amanda walked back toward the gate, the crowd parted for her like a tide. The young man with the phone caught up to her, grinning. "That was epic. I got the whole thing. If you want me to send you the video, just say the word." Amanda smiled faintly. "Thank you. But I think the message has already been sent." When she boarded the plane again, she was met with applause from the first-class cabin. Several passengers reached out to shake her hand or offer words of encouragement. As she settled into her seat, a flight attendant approached with a nervous smile. "Dr. Williams," she said softly, "on behalf of the airline, I want to apologize for everything you've been through. If there's anything you need, please don't hesitate to ask." Amanda nodded, her voice kind but firm. "Thank you. But what I need is systemic change, not just apologies." As the plane taxied down the runway, Amanda stared out the window, her mind racing. This wasn't over. The captain's behavior wasn't an isolated incident, it was part of a larger issue that needed to be addressed. And if anyone was going to lead that charge, it would be her. By the time the plane lifted off, Amanda had already begun drafting her next initiative, a nationwide campaign to combat racial bias in air travel. What had started as an infuriating ordeal was about to become a catalyst for change, one that would echo far beyond the confines of that flight. Sometimes, Amanda thought, the worst moments in life have a way of revealing the best in people. And today, she had witnessed both, the ugliness of prejudice and the beauty of solidarity. The next morning, Amanda sat in her Los Angeles office, the sprawling skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her. Despite the previous day's ordeal, she felt an unusual calm. She had faced discrimination many times in her life, but this time had been different. The public had rallied around her, strangers had stood up for her, and the incident had already sparked a conversation she couldn't ignore. Her assistant, Layla, entered the room with a tablet in hand. "You're trending," she said, setting it on Amanda's desk. "The video's everywhere. News outlets are picking it up, and the airline issued a formal statement this morning." Amanda glanced at the screen. The headline read, "Billionaire entrepreneur faces racial profiling on flight, sparks outrage." Below it was the now viral video of the confrontation, showing Amanda calmly but firmly holding her ground against the captain and the airline staff. The comments section was filled with an outpouring of support, as well as outrage directed at the captain and the airline. "They're in damage control mode," Layla continued. "They're offering a public apology and promising to review their policies." Amanda arched an eyebrow. "Review their policies? That's corporate speak for, hope it blows over." Layla smirked. "Probably. But people are watching this closely. It's not going to go away that easily." Amanda leaned back in her chair, her mind already working. "Good. Then let's make sure it doesn't. Layla, draft a statement. I want to address this directly." "On it," Layla said, typing on her tablet. "What's the tone? Fiery? Diplomatic?" "Firm but constructive," Amanda replied. "This isn't just about me. It's about the millions of people who face this kind of treatment every day but don't have the platform to fight back. I want the airline to know they're not just dealing with bad PR, they're facing a call to action." Layla nodded and left the room. Amanda swiveled her chair to face the window, her thoughts racing. She knew this incident was an opportunity to create real change, but she also knew it wouldn't be easy. She had spent years navigating spaces where she wasn't wanted, breaking down barriers that others had built to keep people like her out. This was just the latest battle in a long war. Her phone buzzed, breaking her reverie. It was an email from a prominent civil rights organization, inviting her to collaborate on a campaign against racial profiling in travel. Amanda smiled. The momentum was building faster than she had anticipated. Over the next few days, Amanda's team worked tirelessly to capitalize on the attention the incident had garnered. They coordinated interviews with major news outlets, held meetings with advocacy groups, and drafted a proposal for sweeping changes in airline policies. Amanda insisted on focusing not just on punitive measures, but on education and training. She wanted mandatory bias training for airline staff, transparent protocols for handling passenger complaints, and a system of accountability that included independent oversight. The first interview aired that evening on a popular news channel. Amanda sat across from the host, her posture relaxed, but her gaze intense. "Dr. Williams, the video of your experience has gone viral, sparking a nationwide conversation about racial profiling. How do you feel about the public's reaction?" "I'm grateful for the support," Amanda said. "But I'm also deeply saddened that this is what it takes for these issues to come to light. What happened to me isn't unique. It's a symptom of a much larger problem, a culture of bias that's ingrained in many of our institutions, including air travel." The host nodded. "The airline has apologized and promised to review their policies. Do you think that's enough?" "It's a start," Amanda replied. "But an apology doesn't address the root cause. What we need is systemic change, policies and practices that prevent this kind of discrimination from happening in the first place." The host leaned forward. "And what does that look like, in your opinion?" "It looks like transparency and accountability," Amanda said. It looks like training programs that teach staff to recognize and challenge their biases. It looks like a system where passengers can report incidents without fear of being dismissed or ignored. And most importantly, it looks like leadership that prioritizes equity over optics. The interview ended with a standing ovation from the studio audience, and the clip quickly became one of the most watched segments of the week. But Amanda wasn't content to stop there. She knew that public attention was fleeting, and real change required sustained effort. 2 weeks later, Amanda found herself sitting in a boardroom at the airline's headquarters, facing a panel of executives. The CEO, a sharp-looking woman in her 50s, opened the meeting with an apology. "Dr. Williams, on behalf of our entire organization, I want to express our deepest regrets for what you experienced. We've reviewed the incident thoroughly and have taken steps to ensure it doesn't happen again." Amanda nodded politely but didn't let her guard down. "I appreciate your apology. But words are just the beginning. I'm here to discuss actions." The CEO gestured to a stack of documents in front of her. "We've outlined a plan for bias training and are implementing new protocols for handling passenger concerns. We'd love to hear your feedback." Amanda spent the next 2 hours dissecting their proposals, offering insights, and pushing for stronger measures. By the end of the meeting, she had secured commitments for independent oversight, annual audits, and a partnership with advocacy groups to monitor progress. As she left the headquarters, Amanda felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a step in the right direction. And she knew the real work was just beginning. The following months were a whirlwind of activity. Amanda launched a nationwide campaign called Equity in Flight, aimed at combating discrimination in air travel. The campaign included public awareness initiatives, partnerships with major airlines, and a legal fund to support passengers who experienced racial profiling. The response was overwhelming. Celebrities endorsed the campaign, lawmakers introduced legislation inspired by its principles, and thousands of people shared their own stories of discrimination. Amanda's social media was flooded with messages of support, as well as stories from people who had faced similar experiences. One story, in particular, stood out. A young black woman wrote to Amanda about being removed from a flight with her 2-year-old son because a flight attendant claimed she was causing a disturbance. The woman's story went viral after Amanda shared it on her platform, sparking another wave of outrage and calls for accountability. As Amanda read the countless messages, she was reminded of why she had chosen this path. It wasn't just about her own experience, it was about creating a world where no one else would have to endure the same. Months after the initial incident, Amanda received an unexpected call from Captain Robert Phillips. She hesitated before answering, unsure of what to expect. "Dr. Williams," he began, his voice tentative. "I don't know if you'll believe me, but I've spent a lot of time reflecting on what happened. I was wrong, and I want to make amends." Amanda was silent for a moment, caught off guard by his admission. "What changed?" she asked, finally. "I watched the video," he said. "Over and over. And I read the comments, the stories people shared. I saw myself through their eyes, and it was a wake-up call." Amanda's tone softened slightly. "Acknowledging the problem is the first step. But the real question is, what are you going to do about it?" "I want to help," he said. "I've already started advocating for better training at the airline. But I know that's not enough. I'd like to work with you, if you'll have me." Amanda considered his offer. Part of her wanted to reject it outright, to tell him it was too little, too late. But another part of her knew that change required allies, even from unlikely places. "Actions speak louder than words, Captain," she said finally. "If you're serious, prove it. Show me you're committed to making a difference." And with that, the next chapter of Amanda's fight for equity began. It wasn't an easy path, but it was one she was determined to walk, because sometimes, the most profound change starts with the smallest spark. The morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Amanda's home office as she reviewed a series of proposals from her team. Each document represented a piece of the broader initiative she had been spearheading since the incident on Flight 372. The Equity in Flight campaign had grown beyond her wildest expectations, becoming a national movement that demanded change not only in air travel but in the broader culture of accountability and inclusion. Amanda's phone buzzed with a notification, and she glanced at it. Another email had come through, this time from a coalition of international airlines. They wanted to discuss adopting her campaign's guidelines as a global standard for anti-bias training. She couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. What had started as a deeply personal affront had evolved into something transformative. Her assistant, Layla, entered with a cup of coffee and a folder. "You've got a packed schedule today," she said, placing the folder on Amanda's desk. "Interviews, 2 strategy meetings, and a call with the Senate Committee about the Equity in Air Travel Act." Amanda smiled wryly. "Just another day." Layla laughed. "Oh, and Captain Phillips left another message. He wants to discuss his latest proposal." Amanda raised an eyebrow. "He's persistent." "He seems genuine, though," Layla said. "I think he's really trying to make amends." Amanda nodded, still weighing how much trust she could place in the man who had caused her so much trouble. She'd allowed him to collaborate on a few small initiatives, but his full rehabilitation in her eyes would take time and consistent effort. Action spoke louder than words, and Amanda wasn't one to let her guard down easily. Later that afternoon, Amanda found herself seated at a long conference table in the heart of Los Angeles. The room was filled with representatives from advocacy groups, airline executives, and government officials. This was the first formal meeting of the Equity in Flight Advisory Council, a body Amanda had fought to create as part of her campaign. "Thank you all for being here," Amanda began, her voice steady but passionate. "We're here today because millions of people have experienced the kind of discrimination and mistreatment that I faced. They don't have the platform I do, but their voices deserve to be heard just as loudly. This council is about ensuring that no one is made to feel less than human because of their race, gender, religion, or any other part of their identity." The room nodded in agreement, and the discussions began. The agenda was packed: finalizing anti-bias training curricula, creating standardized reporting systems for passenger complaints, and drafting recommendations for new federal regulations. Amanda listened intently as each member shared their perspectives, offering insights and challenging assumptions when necessary. One particularly heated discussion arose when an airline executive pushed back against the proposed mandatory bias training. "We're already stretched thin as it is," he argued. "Adding another layer of training will increase costs and strain our workforce." Amanda leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "And what's the cost of not doing it? How many lawsuits, boycotts, and public relations disasters are you willing to endure before you recognize that this isn't just an ethical issue, it's a business imperative?" The executive shifted uncomfortably in his seat but said nothing further. Amanda had learned long ago how to balance diplomacy with resolve, and she wasn't afraid to use her voice to hold people accountable. By the end of the meeting, the council had made significant progress. They voted unanimously to implement the first phase of the Equity in Flight initiative across all participating airlines, with independent audits to ensure compliance. It was a major victory, but Amanda knew the real work was just beginning. That evening, Amanda attended a fundraiser for the legal fund she had established as part of the campaign. The event was held in a sleek downtown venue, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city skyline. The room was filled with influential figures from various industries, all eager to support the cause. As Amanda made her way through the crowd, she was approached by a young woman who looked nervous but determined. "Dr. Williams, I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, clutching a glass of water. "I just wanted to thank you. What you're doing, it means everything to people like me." Amanda smiled warmly. "Thank you. What's your name?" "Jasmine," the woman replied. "I'm a flight attendant. I've seen so many passengers treated unfairly, and it's always bothered me, but I didn't know what to do about it. Your campaign gives me hope that things can change." "Change starts with people like you," Amanda said. "Don't underestimate the power of speaking up and holding others accountable. You have more influence than you think." Jasmine nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude. As she walked away, Amanda felt a renewed sense of purpose. Moments like these reminded her why she had chosen to fight this battle. Later that night, Amanda sat alone on her balcony, gazing at the city lights. The fundraiser had been a resounding success, raising millions of dollars for the legal fund. Yet despite the progress, Amanda couldn't shake the feeling that there was still so much to do. The fight for equity was never ending, and the weight of it often felt overwhelming. Her thoughts were interrupted by a message from Captain Phillips. This time, he wasn't asking for a meeting. Instead, he sent her a video of himself speaking to a group of his fellow pilots. In the video, Captain Phillips stood at the front of a conference room, addressing a roomful of uniformed pilots. "I'm here today because I made a mistake," he said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "A mistake that hurt someone and revealed to me the biases I hadn't acknowledged. It's not enough to say I'm sorry. I need to be part of the solution." He went on to talk about the importance of self-reflection and the need for systemic change in the aviation industry. By the end of the video, Amanda felt a flicker of something she hadn't expected: respect. Phillips wasn't just paying lip service, he was putting himself on the line to advocate for the very changes Amanda had been fighting for. The next morning, Amanda called him. "I saw your video," she said. "It was a good start." "Thank you," Phillips replied. "I mean it when I say I want to help. I know I have a long way to go, but I'm committed." "Then let's keep working," Amanda said. "This isn't about redemption, it's about transformation." Over the following months, Phillips became one of Amanda's most vocal allies. Together, they launched a program for pilots that focused on recognizing and addressing bias, turning him into a surprising but powerful advocate for change. As the Equity in Flight campaign continued to gain momentum, Amanda realized that the movement had grown beyond her. It was no longer just about one woman's experience, it was about a collective demand for justice and equality. And for the first time in a long time, Amanda felt hopeful. Because while the fight was far from over, it was clear that the tide was finally turning. The culmination of Amanda Williams's efforts came on a bright morning in Washington, D.C., nearly a year after the incident on Flight 372. She stood on the steps of the Capitol, flanked by lawmakers, activists, airline executives, and community leaders. Behind her, a massive banner read, "Equity in Air Travel Act, a commitment to justice and inclusion." The press had gathered in full force, cameras clicking and microphones pointed, ready to document this historic moment. Amanda adjusted the microphone and took a deep breath. The past year had been a whirlwind of triumphs and challenges, but this moment made it all worthwhile. She glanced at the crowd, a sea of faces filled with hope, determination, and pride. Among them, she spotted Jasmine, the young flight attendant, standing beside Captain Phillips, who had become a surprising but integral part of the movement. "Good morning," Amanda began, her voice steady and powerful. "Today, we stand at the intersection of history and progress. What began as an isolated incident has become a movement, a collective demand for justice, equity, and accountability in an industry that touches millions of lives every day." The crowd erupted in applause, but Amanda raised a hand to quiet them. "This moment isn't about me. It's about all of us. It's about the countless individuals who have faced discrimination, humiliation, and indignity while simply trying to live their lives. It's about creating a world where no one is judged or mistreated because of their race, gender, or identity." She paused, letting her words sink in. The Equity in Air Travel Act represents more than just policy changes. It represents a commitment to fairness, to respect, to humanity. And today, we're sending a message to the world: prejudice has no place in our skies or on our soil. The applause was thunderous this time, and Amanda stepped back to allow Senator Elaine Harris, one of the Act's co-sponsors, to speak. Senator Harris, a longtime advocate for civil rights, had been instrumental in pushing the legislation forward. As she spoke about the specifics of the bill, mandatory anti-bias training, independent oversight boards, and a streamlined system for passengers to report discrimination, Amanda couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. This was the change she had envisioned, now taking shape in real, actionable ways. After the press conference, Amanda joined a private reception inside the Capitol. The room was filled with influential figures, from policymakers to industry leaders. As she moved through the crowd, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries, she was approached by Captain Phillips. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "We did it," Amanda corrected. "This wouldn't have been possible without allies willing to confront their own biases and fight for change." Phillips nodded, his expression reflective. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about what you said to me after the incident. About actions speaking louder than words. I hope I've proven that I'm serious about making a difference." "You have," Amanda said, offering a small smile. "But the work doesn't stop here. This is just the beginning." As the reception continued, Amanda found herself deep in conversation with Jasmine, who had been selected to represent flight attendants on the Equity in Air Travel Advisory Council. Jasmine's eyes sparkled with excitement as she shared her plans for amplifying the voices of airline staff and passengers alike. "You're going to do incredible things," Amanda said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Your perspective is invaluable, and your courage inspires me." Jasmine blushed, but looked determined. "I wouldn't even be here if it weren't for you." Later that evening, Amanda returned to her hotel, exhausted but fulfilled. She sat by the window, watching the lights of the Capitol glow against the night sky. Her mind drifted to the countless people who had reached out to her over the past year, people from all walks of life who had shared their stories of injustice and resilience. She thought about the young boy who had written to her about his dream of becoming a pilot, inspired by her courage. She thought about the elderly woman who had thanked her for fighting a battle she had endured silently for decades. Amanda knew the road ahead would be long. Change was never easy, and there would always be those who resisted progress. But she also knew that the seeds she had sown were already bearing fruit. The Equity in Air Travel Act was just one piece of a larger puzzle, a step toward a future where equity and inclusion weren't aspirations but realities. The following months were a blur of activity as the act was implemented nationwide. Airlines began rolling out comprehensive anti-bias training programs, overseen by independent organizations. A centralized reporting system was launched, allowing passengers to document incidents of discrimination and ensuring swift, transparent investigations. Amanda personally attended the inaugural training session for pilots and flight attendants, where she shared her story and emphasized the importance of empathy and accountability. One of the most significant moments came when Amanda was invited to address the United Nations. Her campaign had sparked a global conversation, and several countries were now considering adopting similar measures in their aviation industries. Standing before the assembly, Amanda spoke about the universal need for equity and the power of grassroots movements to drive systemic change. "Discrimination is not bound by borders," she said. "It is a global issue that requires a global response. But just as prejudice knows no boundaries, neither does the human capacity for empathy, courage, and action." The speech was met with a standing ovation, and Amanda returned home more determined than ever to continue her work. Back in Los Angeles, Amanda received a surprise visit from a group of passengers who had been on Flight 372 that fateful day. They had formed a grassroots organization called Passengers for Justice, inspired by her actions and the solidarity they had witnessed during the incident. "We wanted to thank you," said a woman holding a bouquet of flowers. "You stood up for yourself, and in doing so, you stood up for all of us." Amanda accepted the flowers with gratitude, feeling a lump form in her throat. "The truth is, I didn't do it alone," she said. "Every voice that spoke up that day mattered. Change happens when we come together and refuse to accept the status quo." As she watched the group leave, Amanda felt a profound sense of purpose. The journey that had begun with humiliation and injustice had transformed into a movement that transcended her own experience. It was a reminder that even in the face of adversity, the power to create change resided in every individual. That night, Amanda sat at her desk, penning the final chapter of her memoir, High Above the Clouds, A Journey of Resilience and Equity. She wrote about the incident, the movement it sparked, and the people who had joined her along the way. But most importantly, she wrote about hope, the belief that no matter how daunting the challenge, a better world was always within reach. As she closed the manuscript, Amanda looked out at the city lights, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. The fight for equity was far from over, but she was ready for whatever came next. After all, the skies were vast, and her journey was just beginning.